We're back continuing our conversation around comprehensive immigration reform. And with me, I have a practicing attorney in this area of immigration, Marketa Lindt of Chicago, Sidley, and Austin. Thank you so much, Marketa, for joining us.
Thank you, Bruce.
Well, could you tell us a little bit about your work in this area during this period of immigration reform?
Certainly. I'm a partner at the Chicago law firm Sidley Austin. We're a global law firm, and I work within the immigration group. And we help employers with managing their workforce with their foreign national workers, and we also do a lot of work in the area of immigration compliance.
Could you speak to your thoughts about the impact of comprehensive immigration reform and how that will impact areas of HR within the firms you consult and advise?
Well, I think it's a really, really critical time right now. I'm very excited that it seems that immigration reform is finally moving forward after a number of years of a hiatus. And I'm particularly excited about the fact that it seems to be this time around really a bipartisan effort with a lot of support both among the Democrats as well as the Republicans, and with really substantial coalitions around the country of agreement between business and labor and religious groups and community organizations that something really needs to be done about the broken system that we're all operating under today.
In this time of fluidity, how do people arrive at planning to continue to try to move things along in the midst of who knows exactly what's going to come next?
Well, I think at this point things are so much in flux that my clients, the companies that I represent at this point, are just moving forward as they have, because we've gone through periods before when we've thought we might get immigration reform and it hasn't succeeded. And I think given the uncertainty of the process at this point, companies are keeping their eyes open and thinking about how things might be different, but at this point in time are continuing with the processes as they would otherwise.
And have the entities that you interact with during this process, have some of them inquired, not the policymakers, not the legislators, but the practitioners at the different offices, the different functions of government? Have some of them come out and try to poll or question or find out what your thoughts are about where improvement could be? Is there some quality feedback response mechanism that exists in this space?
Well, absolutely. And as I said, our clients, the companies that we work with, are tremendously interested in how this might roll out and how it will affect their employees, whether it'll be easier to bring in workers, whether it'll be easier to keep workers, whether their workers will have more flexibility in the sort of work that they can do, and whether the companies can operate with their foreign national workers in a way that allows them to keep them and to make use of their talent as best as possible. The companies are very, very interested. They have interacted with us. A lot of them belong to industry groups that also have a significant interest and impact on this process.
And you've seen the personal side of this too, because it's not just, these aren't just boxes, or these are people. These are people's lives, and their families, their lives are hanging in the balance of some of these things. Talk about the impact that's had on you in terms of, as you see what people struggle to stay with on this path for so long.
Well, it's really, really difficult on people. And I mean, if you think about who these people are, these are people like yourself, like myself, people who have ambitions, who are smart people with career plans, with families. And when they come out of schools, and often these are people who come out of our best schools here in the United States, out of our top programs, and they have ambitions for themselves and for their families. And they are then unleashed into this system that's extremely unpredictable, and they don't really know where they're going to be in 5 or 10 years, and it's very, very stressful. And then they're subjected to arbitrary timeframes and quotas and backlogs, and it limits their own ability to be mobile and to make career choices in the way that any person would want to make their career choice based on what's best for them at that time, because they're stuck in this immigration system that's so inflexible and so difficult to navigate through. So it really takes a very, very significant personal toll on people, and I see that in the people that I interact with day to day.
And as you've practiced in this area for a while, have you been able to shed light on approaches, policies, strategies that can make this very arduous challenge as best it can be across all skill levels? So you're able to, through the systems that you use, the approaches that you know what works and doesn't work, educate, and you and HR directors work together to make it as good as it can be as they work through this process.
Well, absolutely, and that's my job. I work with the companies that I represent and with their employees to try to get through this arcane and complicated system in a way that's as painless as possible, and in a way that allows the companies to plan and to look forward and to integrate their foreign national workers, again, in a way that isn't more difficult or more arduous than their other workers because of these arbitrary timelines and backlogs and so on. And so we work with our clients and with the foreign nationals that we represent to put into place systems, to use technology, and to do advanced planning so that they can run their business in the way that they would want to run their business without being held back by the immigration processes.
Because, and I mentioned that specifically in that many of us have our own vantage points in thinking about where the investments are being made in human capital. And so the thought is that maybe a big firm is only coming to get advice and counsel about what to do about their upper tier workers. But that's probably misguided. They're probably trying to find out what to do about all of their workers might be foreign nationals.
Well, I think foreign nationals really exist in a lot of different tiers of the American economy. At a big company, you sometimes see executives and really top level people that are foreign nationals, and of course a lot of people in the science, technology, engineering, and math areas, which can be in R&D and in research and in a lot of different areas. But you also see foreign nationals coming out of business school, taking important business and strategy positions, marketing positions, and here I've just talked about professional positions, but then of course there are also a lot of foreign nationals at all levels in the lesser skilled areas and in the trades, and are a very, very important part of the economy in terms of manufacturing and lots of other areas. So I think in the United States, we certainly see foreign nationals at all levels.
And on the back office side of things, have you seen again, over the time that you've practiced in this area, a real improvement in vendors listening to the concerns and the needs, and the technology actually bringing something to the table in terms of elevating this process and making it less arduous than it has to be, but also allowing you to spend more time really at the strategy level as opposed to the packaging and shuffling and boxing level? Have you seen the technology been a contributor to your work process?
Absolutely, Bruce, and that's a great question. I mean, as an attorney working in such a paper-intensive process, there are so many different tasks that go into representing a company in its immigration work, from talking to folks and understanding the issues in a case and developing strategy and holding people's hands when they're very frustrated and going through a difficult process. But then also there are a lot of forms and a lot of work in gathering the information to put on the forms, and then, as you said, assembling them and filing them. And the technology now has really developed to a point where we've been able to automate a lot of things, we've been able to track a lot of things, we've been able to put packages together in a way where we can really focus on what's more important, which is providing the guidance and, again, providing the advanced planning and the strategy on individual cases, and also sort of the workforce planning overall that a company needs to do.
So they're dashboards that allow both you and the clients to keep track of what's going on in this very complex process with all these documents. And so they can not, without having to necessarily track you down and get you on the phone, they can monitor what's going on, what their workflow, what's in process, where its stage is at. And so they can dip into your work and you can dip into theirs, but everybody can keep a relative comfort level as to where things at.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And having been in this practice for a while, I remember the old days when the phone would just ring all day and our foreign national clients would call and they'd say, has my case been filed? What's my receipt number? What's happening at the immigration service? And the good software packages now that are available for this sort of work allow the foreign nationals themselves to log into their own web page and to track the process of their case, to get information, and to be able to do it in a self-serve way where they have a little bit more control and a little bit more power over their own process. And then, of course, it frees us up from answering those kind of inquiries to doing the more strategic elements of the work.
So some of the comfort that you're giving to your clients right now in this time of conversation at the policy level is that both them and you believe that this time something can happen, and something is likely to happen. But even when that something happens, what is the likelihood of how long it will take for that to be ingested and digested and turned into the practice that actually makes a difference on a day-to-day basis with people trying to move through this effort?
Well, I guess that's $2 million questions. Okay. One is the immigration reform going to succeed? And then the other, what will be the time frames for implementation once a package passes? And of course, we don't know the answer to that. We're just sort of midstream right now with the legislative process itself. And when the legislation passes, really we're not going to see the results of much of that until not only Congress passes legislation, but then the agencies write the regulations that actually are going to put into place the processes that we follow as users of the system. So hopefully we'll see some immigration reform this year or early next. But then I expect that it'll take probably a year or two or even more, depending on which aspects of the legislation we're talking about, before we can actually jump in and avail ourselves of some of these new processes.
And does it have to be one big whole enchilada, or can there be little breakthroughs? Can some of this reform come in the way of not the whole big? Are there some areas where little chip-offs can make a big difference right now? Is that something that does have to be just one big honking bill, or can it be something where elements of improvement can be agreed upon, put into law, put into practice as the bigger thing moves down the river?
Well, that's a very interesting question, and I think what you've outlined are the two different approaches that we're seeing right now in the Senate and in the House of Representatives. In the Senate passed a bill that's come out of that chamber that was really the result. It's a comprehensive bill, and it was really the result of collaboration between a lot of different parties that have different interests, but they were able to come together and craft a package that they all agreed on that would meet their most important goals in terms of priorities, in terms of an earned legal status program, in terms of changes and reforms to the H-1B program, in terms of enforcement, and in terms of some changes in other elements of the business immigration program, and also a guest worker program, and some other pieces. But on the Senate side, there was really a sense that unless there's a comprehensive package, it doesn't make sense to move it forward unless all of those pieces exist. And so the bipartisan group that crafted that package felt very strongly about that. Now, in the House of Representatives, there's much more of a piecemeal approach of the kind that you described, and their pieces are moving through separately, so it's not a balanced, negotiated outcome. It's different groups within the House that are pushing forward what they feel is important. And so far in the House, it's been primarily focused on enforcement, and some other pieces are moving their way through. But I think it will be, I personally would support a negotiated, balanced bill, because I think that's really going to be the way to look at what our economy needs, what we need in terms of our identity as a country, what our values are that we find important, and to bring them all together in a way that makes sense.
Very good. Well, in closing, before we bring up our last panelist, and then we're going to come back and have a collective discussion, are there some potential impacts that comprehensive immigration reform will have on worker mobility? Sometimes this is a process, of course, that is sponsored by a specific employer or somebody who starts their career, but people want to have options and they want to move around. Is this something that will be addressed by what is being talked about now, people to start someplace but end up as they continue to create careers and create a life in America?
Well, again, the legislation is really in flux right now, and we don't have any specific provisions that we can talk about, but I think generally the way that it seems to be taking shape, I think there are going to be some provisions that are going to allow for more mobility for workers, and there are going to be other provisions that are going to actually allow for less mobility for workers. There are a number of provisions that seem to really have taken hold for the science, technology, engineering, and math graduates, the STEM graduates, and it looks that they'll have much more flexibility and a much more streamlined path to go from their school programs to work for employers and then go directly to the green card, and they won't be tied to the employers in the same way that they would be under the current system. There there are some other workers, though, for example, workers that will still be on H-1Bs but aren't the STEM employees that I just mentioned, that may actually have a more difficult time with mobility, because there are some restrictions that are being discussed with respect to the H-1B program that may make it more difficult for employers to sponsor H-1Bs that, again, that are not the STEM graduates, and that in turn may have some adverse impact on mobility and actually may have a chilling effect on those folks. So it sort of cuts both, it cuts both ways, and there really is still so much up in the air that's sort of a tough question to answer. So I think we're going to have to keep watching and see how that all pans out.
And speaking of watching and monitoring this iceberg, this coming down, how do you stay up with what's going on? What tools would